George, first of all, thanks a lot for taking the time. We are very grateful for the time with you. And you are a man of many achievements, but rather than me listing them, it'd be interesting for us to hear them in your words. If you could introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And on the academic side, my claim to fame was the construction of an atlas of the lowly rat. It's amazing how many psychologists and others use rats in their research. Unfortunately, the rat is also a good facsimile for our behavior. Hence its relevance to psychologists. So most neuroscientists work on the rat and mouse. Only a small percentage, maybe 5%, work on humans. So once we did more accurate atlas of the rat brain, we had an entry into the field, and I continued there with constructing maps now of the human. In between, I did rats of the mouse, the rhesus monkey, the marmoset, the bird. You might say the bird. The birds actually have first-class brains. They just haven't had good public relations. And we spent 5 years establishing the correspondences with the brain of human and bird. And birds are used, of course, in developmental studies because of the easy accessibility of the embryo. So in science, it is cartography, brain cartography. And if I were to put it in a spherical way, much like theories, so atlases assist you to find your way in unknown territories. And by constructing atlases, we assist scientists who, inspired by human considerations, wish to establish an animal model of, let's say, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or depression in the rat, mouse, monkey. They can travel unimpededly, seamlessly between the brain of humans and experimental animals to test their hypotheses and then relate their observations to the human. So that is in science what I've been doing. Outside of science, I've been interested in the environment since I read the De Molina and Rowland article in the Scientific American about the erosion of the ozone layer, in which they concluded what the hell else has escaped us. So I started worrying, and I took part in environmental groups. I established some myself, but it was a defeat that led me to the effort to write a novel. And so the other thing I've been involved with, especially for the last 21 years, is writing a novel, which is fiction, but uses fiction to present facts. So it's neuroscientific facts and environmental science that are presented in a novel, but it's a novel.
When I read that it took you 21 years, I became totally curious. I haven't heard any writer telling that it took 21 years. How come?
It started so low that I had to work that time. That is, I have been a scientist and I can write science text, and including textbooks, but I was not familiar with literature, how to write literature. So I had to start there from the beginning. And I didn't give up because I saw the book improving. And actually, it was a good part of life that I met other writers, or actually accomplished writers, who assisted me, who took weeks to go through the manuscript. Yes, one friend saw me when I was about to submit the manuscript at the cafe where I was usually writing it, and she asked me, how is the book going? The usual question. I said, 21 years and still not finished. She said, my cousin's novel was published posthumously. I said, you're giving me hope. Yeah. So, yeah, it was, the thing is that I wanted, is going to be my only work, and I wanted it to be as good as I can make it.
Maybe to set the stage, as a neuroscientist, to me, the elephant in the room is that whole hard problem of consciousness and the brain, the relationship between the physical phenomena of brain processes and the experience of consciousness. And as you've mapped a lot of those areas of the brain, both in animal and human, I can't think of a better person to give the take on where we're at with that.
Yeah, well, as it concerns the heart, the brain was not in favor, certainly not by pharaohs or their minders, who heedlessly discarded the brain in funerary practices and sent millennia of pharaohs brainless to their afterlife. It was Hippocrates who sang the greatest hymn to the brain. He said, men not to know that it is the brain and the brain alone that's responsible for our laughter, jests, happiness, and as well as our tears, grief, and sorrow. Now, if you go, though, on a Valentine's Day to choose a card, as I did in Australia, I was confronted with 300 cards, all of them with at least one red heart on them, none of them with the brain. And I was forced to write a letter in the conversation with the title, Darling, I love you from the bottom of my brain. And I got a call from a lady journalist from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Are you insisting that the heart has nothing to do with love? I said, if in a heart transplant, I get your heart, I am not going to fall in love with your husband. She said, what a pity, and he's such a lovely man. So the public at large still thinks that the heart has something to do with emotion, but it doesn't. The brain is what does, and we can get the heart of someone else who can have parts of a pig heart. It won't make us pigs or anything else. And as to concerns what in the brain is responsible for the feelings and all else, well, certainly the brain is, I mean, once they used to study the soul, right? But psychology lost its soul in the 1930s. No academic psychologist I know of uses the word soul. It's just not used. Even psychotherapeutic drugs act on anything else but the soul. So if the soul is where sensations become perceptions, where logic resides, decisions are made, love is manufactured, memory is stored, then there's no reason to hypothesize the presence of the soul, because there is already an organ that performs these functions, the brain. And as it concerns exactly where things are happening in the brain and how exactly the perception works and what it is to feel love, that is related to consciousness, and neuroscience does not know the answer to it. The assumption is that is most neuroscience believe, and of course it could be that the minority of neuroscientists who have a different view are the correct ones, but most think that the brain and only the brain is responsible, and much like when it disintegrates, so will all those feelings, perceptions, and there will be nothing left. There's no evidence for anything else. Certainly, we know from neuroscience that if you lose part of a lobe of your brain, correspondingly, you have a deficit in that which that lobe subserves. So if it's a visual system and I get a stroke in the upper part of the visual cortex, then I could have, might lose color perception in the lower left quadrant of my vision. If, on the other hand, I get a stroke on my parietal region on the right-hand side, then I get sensory neglect of things placed on my left. So if I concentrate on a point in the middle, I do not see things to the left, to the extent that people don't eat on the things placed on the left side of their plate. Okay, and if you have suffered damage to the frontal lobes, then you will have erosion of foresight, diminished concern for the future, and disinhibition. Now, if your whole brain is rotting in the funerary casket, are you going to have a soul that flies to the heavens? If the thing that we do know is that if you lose part of this, part of that, part of that, correspondingly, you lose part of your personality, then why should we think that if you lose the whole thing, somehow you will be intact in heaven or hell?
I wonder, when here in Denmark, when there's a discussion about the brain, it's often claimed that it's shocking how little we understand, still how little we understand about the brain. Maybe not the very physical thing, but how emotions are created, how we kind of use emotions, how we develop as we do. Do we have a fixed personality, or is it growing, or whatever? There's a lot of claim that we know very little about the brain, actually. What is your opinion about how much we actually know and what we don't know?
Yeah, structurally, as you mentioned first, we have rehabilitated the human brain to the level of the rat brain in the subcortex. That is, I feel satisfied that we've made some progress there. The rat is very much more studied than the human. So structurally, we know a number of things about the area below the covering of the brain, below the cortex. The cortex is still have problems anatomically, but of course, more interesting thing is functionally and how are these things constructed. One thing, of course, that psychologists, I think they're just about unanimous, is that personality is formed in the old question of nature versus nurture, is nature via nurture. Okay.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Yeah, and a number of neuroscientists perceive that there are only two factors in forming character. One is the genetic endowment you receive from your parents, and the other is the environmental influences, which can be, of course, intra-utero to start with, or even you could have even antecedent to that from your mother or grandmother, some influences that can be passed on the way genes are expressed. The genetic structure will be the same, but which genes are expressed can be influenced by the behavior of at least that's what they find in rats. So you can predict certain things about human behavior. I can predict that not many Danish would go and stone a woman who allegedly burned the Bible. Okay, but I can predict that if there is to be stoning, it'll be in countries where we know that there's a hot housing of children into theories of good God, the real true God, and they get offended if you trouble that system. So you can predict reasonably well human behavior, not one individual, but you can predict where such things are more likely to occur. I can predict that if Stefan and myself, who are born in a country where they stone women for allegedly burning their holy books, Stefan and I would have equal chance of participating in the stoning as men born there now. So you can say a lot about how behavior is developed. Now, what exactly in the brain is different in people who have been subjected to this environment and that, we don't know. I mean, they can't even find out what's different in the brain of Einstein and the mere mortals. So they must be. But it's just so complex in the sense that you have a profile of, let's say, a couple of thousand neurotransmitters, a couple of thousand major connections, and it's the balance of these that can produce one thing or another. And early training, of course, as Freud pointed out, the child is the father of the man. So early training has a greater influence on behavior, a greater effect. So a lot can be predicted about behavior.
So
Yes.
can I continue with as an environmental activist, something that intrigued me, because I was trying to write an article about how the mind cannot contain the complexity of our times. And then in The River Divided, your novel, I read one of the protagonists, Jose de Olmos, saying, without considering the severe limitations which evolution has placed on the brain, we dare to play God with the earth. And so that made me think, okay, the problem is deeper than either technology being developed or having to be developed, or even political will to apply technology. It seems that the problem is even deeper, that fundamentally our brain is not equipped to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And I was wondering what your thoughts about it are.
Yes, Stefan, I wrote A River Divided for exactly that reason, to indicate that we need to know who we are, which is another primate on the planet, and that we bring together the baggage, which was very helpful to us back then, but we are now mice constructing mousetraps. What else is an atomic weapon but a mousetrap? It requires perfect decision making, and we know that the brain is not a perfect organ. So it is a way to understand our cognitive, emotional, motivational limitations that are imposed on us, but by our brain. Of course, the figure that really pointed this or rather removed the human exceptionalism is Darwin. And this is consistent with his theory to understand who we are, in the hope that we would refrain from allowing ourselves to have such capabilities. The brain, I think, is not in the Goldilocks zone. Goldilocks zone refers to a place where it's just right. And the Earth is in the Goldilocks zone in relation to its distance from the sun. Any much closer would have been burned, much further would have been all frozen. But the brain is not. If it were smaller than what it is, let's say just a bit bigger than the monkey brain or the chimpanzee brain, it would not have the wherewithal to support language which permitted the development of science and technology, which today threaten existence. If the brain, on the other hand, were larger than what it is, it might have understood the problem, even solved it. So it's not small enough, it's not large enough. Now, you might say, what size would you like? And not that we have any option, but at least
400 grams.
400 grams more, I think. Yeah. But because the chimpanzee has 600, we have 1,300. Maybe 900 would have been just right to give us a capacity to not to be troglodytes, to move out of the caves, but not to give us the capacity to construct nuclear weapons and the internal combustion engine.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us? Because Would say, you know, now there is still a lot of work being done in science, for example, and in technology, let's say, more than science, around AI, around automation, etc. And then actually on that aspect that you are discussing, which is how do we work with our consciousness, etc. I mean, relatively little being actually spent or focused on, where maybe that's actually the bigger issue or the more fundamental issue. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about where that leaves us and where we invest in research or focus on technology?
That's right. There is no evidence that technology has come to the aid of the environment. I think really that, to me, it seems the most fundamental thing, unless you have a livable planet where civilization preferably can flourish as well, then all else or other causes that you have, equality between sexes, between races, between for animals, they are not relevant. So if we understand the technology is in the service of whatever you want to do. If you want to exploit the fisheries, you're far better to take satellite images of where there's fish and direct your activity to eliminate as many fish as possible, to catch as many fish as possible, and make the greatest profit now. And then you re-equip your ship for another resource to go after once you destroy the resource that you were initially interested in. So technology there is a tool. It can be used either way. It can, of course, assist in understanding and monitoring systems and see what might be less destructive. But the task of constructing a sustainable society hasn't been understood, I think, by a number of people, at least certainly a lot of people who vote for those people who are even denying greenhouse gas emissions present a problem. I'll just bring a talk that I had with my 8-year-old granddaughter to illustrate the issue of understanding the problem, the severity of the problem. I asked her, what are you going to do today that does not pollute the planet? She said, running. I said, that's good, but if you run, you will wear out more shoes and they'll have to manufacture more shoes. She said, running barefoot. I said, that's good, but if you run, you'll build up your appetite and they'll have to slaughter more chicken to bring it to you to the city to eat. Sitting in a chair. I said, that is good, but to make a chair, you have to cut a tree. Then lying on the ground naked. The problem with humans, I think that I can say it now because I've reached this later stage in my science, that we have also anosognosia. We don't know our disease. We don't know our limits. That is, if you look at it, psychologists will tell you that soul is not required, right? That they don't need it for understanding behavior or to modify it for those people who want to change something in their behavior, abandon an addiction, get rid of a love that torments them, whatever. On the top of it, humans have no freedom, no free will. That is, if you accept what most neuroscientists say, and of course the minority could be correct, but at the moment you will hear that given that there are only two factors that determine behavior, and this is really also in A River Divided in the book, where they are identical twins raised apart, and as different artists would sculpt different statues from the same block of marble, different environments would create different characters, even with the same DNA. So I had the benefit there of a lot of research done on identical twins in psychology. So humans have not understand those two things, but look, the hubris that they consider themselves to be made in the image of God. I told my granddaughter of the problem Sisyphus faced. This king of Corinth was condemned by the gods to push a rock uphill all day long only for it to fall down, and he had to push the next day again. And I told her, because he was narcissistic, egotistical, and insulting. She said, like Trump. So we face ourselves in a triple delusion, one of which is also a hubris. My aim in writing the book was to assist in resetting religion, science, and culture. And if you needed what you need there is a total reset, much like similar to what the early Christians achieved, early ones, not the recent ones that are against prophylactics and have an obsession with sex. And I don't mind if they were against prophylactics for any other reason, but they are against prophylactics, and the outcome of that is overpopulation, because you can't assist as easily those who don't want to have more children, not to have them. Every year we get 80 million more people on the planet, unwanted births. And so family planning even is inhibited by the evil influence of religion.
So you are saying really that there is, and that corresponds to what's happening in your book with Evelyn, the character at the beginning, being in that illusion that if she can impregnate herself with the DNA of Jesus, then she'll create the savior or something. And of course this is not what's happening. I mean the pregnancy happened, but the saviors are not nowhere to be found. And so, but interestingly, and even now, when you talk about Sisyphe, you invoke the power of narrative and myth. And I'm wondering, so to reset the context, is it what you think is the best tool, in a sense, to get powerful narratives?
Yes, well, that's right. The narrative is what you want to bring to the attention of people, and religion could be a force for good. At the moment, it is principally not, though many religious people are outstanding. The whole system is not helpful, from Ireland to Israel to India to Iraq to Indonesia, and I'm just going through the I countries. There is strife which is exacerbated because of religion. And again, on the issue of the environment, though the Pope has come up with that encyclica Laudato Si, which acknowledges the problem with the environment to his credit, but at the same time, the Catholic Church is contributing to overpopulation, which is one of the major areas where you could have some progress, in the sense that if you have twice as many people, you have to ice the environmental problem, other things being equal.
To go towards that connection between neuroscience and leadership a bit further, and brain and motivation, there was that quote as well from Christopher in River Divided about what could be worse than life without meaning. And here what I'm wondering again is, so how what have you learned as a neuroscientist about motivation, in a sense? How can we orient ourselves in a more wise way from all that research that you've done, or what you've concluded through that career of scientific research?
Yes, that's right. Well, biologically, there is no meaning. It's of course, at our level, is whatever meaning you attribute to it, and we have a predisposition to attribute meaning. As materialist as I am, when my 1-year-old grandson ignored everybody in the room and rushed and grabbed my legs, I felt good. So we are predisposed to such things, and that's why we survived. So certain things are pleasant to us, and therefore, if we see, we can attribute meaning to many things, to human relations, and that, of course, had an initial other reason. Nature only cares that it reproduces itself. That is, the cells only care to reproduce themselves, the original cell, and subsequently the organisms, and the selection comes along and picks the ones that are better suited. And so you can find meaning in many things. And depending also on your background, you might find meaning in praising God. That is fine, as long as you don't want to kill the apostates, the infidels, the atheists, the homosexuals. Hey, that's fine.
I come to think of one of my professors when I had finalized and I started to write a book because I was critical about all the personality tests, because I thought they were kind of narrowing down the view on humans. And then I reached out to him and we had a talk, and he said to me, Berit, please remember that humans have willpower. And I mean, I'm doing I do a lot of coaching every day.
Yeah.
It's not therapy, it's coaching. And even today I had a coaching with a general practitioner who was kind of caught up in a lot of duty and work and everything. And I said to this person, it stops now. I mean, that's not coaching, it's not therapy, it's just, please evoke your willpower now. And
well,
when we and when we finalized the dialogue, there was a lot of motivation to do something differently.
Yeah, and you are part of his environment. He's slave to yesterday. All of us are slave to yesterday. You cannot, the brain can't possibly make any decision other than what it has been molded into by the environment in which it developed from early on and more recent. So if we accept that we are slaves of yesterday, this now leads to this brilliant discovery by psychologists, which you are using, Berit, which they discovered, the psychologists so clever, that today is tomorrow's yesterday.
Yes.
And they take the person with them today on a journey, and they show them certain things and even give him an instruction like the one you did, the evoke your willpower. Well, you are making changes in his brain just now. Now, the fact that he came to you is only due to the fact that he was in an environment that permitted such approach of going to a therapist. If you were born in a different environment that have different views about this, wouldn't have come. So
Exactly.
at any given time, he will act only on the basis of yesterday. But today is tomorrow's yesterday. So today you can make changes, and under the same circumstances tomorrow, internal and external circumstances, the person might make a different decision, hopefully in the direction that you want the person to go.
That's why we are so occupied with deep relationships and deep dialogue and communication, because we have a chance to influence. I become more and more curious about what is driving you. I thought, yeah, is it curiosity? And then I started to think, no, probably not curiosity. Because then you couldn't have spent 21 years writing one book if you were really driven by curiosity. So I decided it's rather something about responsibility, having a chance to influence, reading the context, and then having a chance to influence by having stamina. But what do you?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you have some reasonable guesses. Well, curiosity, I could have satisfied that better by reading a couple of other books rather than writing my own all the time.
Exactly. Yes.
But there is a satisfaction in writing. That is, if you can make a sentence that you feel that is well done, it has its own satisfaction. The irony of it, English is not my first language, but now I'm sought after by those who write research applications, because I can construct their sentences, okay, because I've learned this now, the trick. Yeah, so it had its intrinsic value of writing, but of course there was also the other of I feel that there's nothing more. I feel that there's no hope that humans will construct a sustainable society, but also there's nothing more important than trying to achieve that. And doing my science, I satisfied my curiosity, and I got promotions, got more money.
You got all the career you could want. Yeah.
But the other thing, I felt it's actually more important. And if you ask me which of your works would you like to take with you, it probably would be the novel. I still have to wait because it just now is coming out in the US, the novel. But my feeling is that that book, I feel I've given something from my knowledge of science, of course, as well, but something that is not for my self-advancement. I did it because I thought that something is needed here.
Yeah. That's why I chose the word responsibility, even plight. If you can, you must, and you will do it. That's the impression I get from you. But then I also become curious about kind of what is actually going on behind the kind of academic, very well thought through appearance you have. So I was wondering, what specific feeling do you want to avoid in your life?
Well, the extreme hurts, because I've seen it in some people. That is, I'd like to go first before the loved ones, my loved ones. So that's one worry. And of course, the issue of not losing your mind and be there a burden to uncomfortable, in continuous in stress for yourself and burden to others. And
so your fear is being kind of useless or not helpful?
It's not occupying my mind, other than if only I'm lucky and I avoid these things. That's all I'm saying about my fear. But the thing real that got me angry, of course, the thing that gets me the angriest is a sliver under my nail. I mean, that I really have to deal with. I mean, that's I have to to act immediately.
What does it mean, sliver? Please say it again.
If you have pain, like a sliver under your nail,
sure.
Then that motivates me to no end. That I really motivate. If I have a bad back, all the issues about the environment, the global warming, all disappear, and my back is the issue. But beyond that, which is most of the time, of course, I've been reflecting on this, and it is just a pity to lose this beautiful planet and the beautiful creatures in it for virtually nothing. I mean, I ran as a candidate for the Australian Cyclist Party. If only the society avoided some of the excesses, then we could give a chance to some more generations to establish something better, to find something better and more permanent, because even cycles will destroy the planet if you have enough of them for enough time. The tires, right, to construct them. But at least, that buys you time. So I've been involved with this, just a disappointment that in people's indifference to this, and got me on to failure led me to fiction.
Failure led you to fiction. Yeah. Now I think I understand. You must have a huge drive inside you. When we look at your CV and what you have been doing over the years, you have been working around the clock to provide that. And now I get what is the driver? Yes, things. If you see something that is too stupid or too kind of not relevant or destructive, you really have the urge to kind of understand it and try to influence it. Isn't that the driver?
Exactly. There's a character in A River Divided who the mentor of Jose the Olmos in Buenos Aires, who at one moment says, I had a dream that I was in an airplane, and strangely the whole world was in the airplane, but the airplane was crashing, and I was calling out, don't crash it, it's a pity to lose it. And actually I had that dream.
Another totally a different question. Having had such a dynamic career with so much potential for influencing, are you ever bored?
Well, I have good friends. It's who are stimulating. I have evenings with them. So no, if anything, I too many things that I'd like to do, and there's no time.
Yes.
There's a saying by Kazantzakis that goes like this in translation: life is but a lightning. Life is but a lightning, but we have time. Okay, so yes, now I feel so quickly. I'm approaching 80, and yet some things I managed to do. I feel that the time was very short, but yeah, but we can do a few things.
New things when we look at what you did. So that leads me to, I'm certain that you have had these questions over and over again, but I want to know, what are you most proud of?
Well, the science, it has been a nice game.
Nice game, yeah.
Yes, and it's like a puzzle that you try to solve to see what is corresponding between the brain of humans and experimental animals. And it was nice. But if I were to say what I am proud of, I'd say the novel, for the reason that the other one gave me the education of my children, right? I got a good salary. I got a good life out of it. But this one wasn't for that reason. It was because of failure to achieve anything with the things I tried in direct action on the environment. So yeah, the novel, I would say, yeah, I would think that is my achievement.
Yes, I also got the sense that you are very much aware of beauty. When you said, you even looked happy when you said, a sentence, when it is made and created, it creates some kind of happiness in you. So beauty as such, is that a part of your kind of the meaning of life?
Yes, well, as turns out, there was a carryover there from the science. The maps of the brain I constructed are not only from utilities point of view, well done, so that they would not lead you astray, that they will be taking you properly to understand what's happening in the brain, but also artistically, they are well done. So there was a bit of carryover there.
Yeah, then you look again happy when you're saying it.
Yeah, well, the brain is funny. The brain is beautiful for us who like that sort of work. And I could look under the microscope and feel the same thing you would if you were to go to Prado or to Louvre.
Look at the Monet picture.
Yeah, exactly. I can describe to you how the cell bodies of the oculomotor nucleus are nested in fascicles of the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and how the fibers then have an orthogonal disposition to the other fibers. And to me, looking at that is like looking at the mountains, a row of mountains, whatever might be to someone else.
So it has been a strong driver for you when you kind of discovered, or what you did discover in the brain. A driver was, it's beautiful to look at, to get to know.
It's beautiful, and we had fun with it. In that, on occasion, you end up finding an area that nobody had noticed before. And
Sure.
then you have a chance to name it. And when my colleague of 45 years, Charles Watson, and I happen upon a nucleus, a new area of the brain, we stop work. He knows how to play the saxophone, and he plays the saxophone.
Looking at how much you have achieved and how ambitious you are, could you share with us how to cope with when you start losing some motivation or start to kind of lose energy? What are your coping strategy? Because you must know how to kind of stay on this high level of performance. When you lose energy, how do you cope? If you ever do?
I've been have more than enough projects that attract me to go through to say, oh, well, I'm done, and what can I do now? Actually, having concentrated work, it gives me a nicer break when I do have a break from science, and enjoy those other things, which are hobbies of like swimming, fishing in the Mediterranean, or in the Pacific of Sydney. But yeah, I didn't have that experience, luckily, of having lost motivation, not this far.
No. It sounds like you have been clever or lucky or intuitive or whatever to have several tracks to work on, not being linear, only the brain. It's the brain, it's relationships, it's dialogue, it's writing, it's a beautiful sentence, it's our environmental, it's this spirituality. It's interesting to learn that you are able to be both supportive and critical at the same time, talking about spirituality.
Well, the only time I thought of giving up writing, there was one point, was when I was reading concurrently the Odyssey and the Iliad. And I thought, how can I compete? What is the point?
I know.
What else do you not know that you wish you could know? You know, as a scientist who's elucidated some big parts of the cartography of the brain, etc. I'm wondering if there's something either that you don't know you would like to know, or would like to know how to do, kind of, you know, as a doer of science and environmentalism.
Yes. I think my unsolved puzzle, and would be one of many others, is the puzzle of consciousness. We don't know how this comes about, the feelings, how they come about. It's like if there was any room for metaphysics, it will be there. Everything else, you don't need it. As Laplace said to Napoleon when he presented him with the model of the universe, and Napoleon asked, where is God in all this? And Laplace said, Majesty, we don't need that hypothesis. So we don't need anything else but consciousness. Everything else, science copes, or at least there's hope that it'll cope. I'm hoping that it might be solved, but I don't think that the hope is is going to become a reality. That's what I would like to know. How this happens? We know something about consciousness in the sense that we exile it when we go to sleep. We have very little of it when we're embryos, if anything, and we're losing a lot of it when we're dementing. But even in dementia, you find that the person, if you prick their palm, as Alzheimer's did to his patient, well, the person will react to pain. So there is pain there, perceived very well. So we know that the rat is conscious, and the bees are conscious, the chimpanzee is self-conscious even, and that the maybe consciousness even further down, and of course not as complex consciousness. So we know something about it. Firstly, ontologically, how you develop from embryo, and phylogenetically, how animals that didn't evolve so many organs and so a big brain as we have. And we know that once you have enough neurons, you can fall in love. But how exactly all this happens, nobody knows.
So, I think this is full circle, because I started with that question about the hard problem of consciousness, and we just end on that. So I think that's wonderful.
Why did you accept our invitation? Why did you say yes to have this dialogue? You don't know any of us. We are not in your field of knowledge or in your social area. Why did you say yes to this dialogue?
Yes, I wanted my book to be seen, to be heard, because as you know, it's not a profitable enterprise. You losing money, a lot of money, if you publish a book. Yes. But I failed in activism, and I wanted to do something rather than sit on the side and say, forget it, I'm not going to do anything. But before I go, I would like to wish your listeners their brain to shrink less than expected for their age.
And how could they deal with that? What a good advice to kind of prevent?
That's right. Neuroscientists have not cured any disease, but they are not altogether useless. They have discovered what assists in the delay of onset of dementia, including Alzheimer's, which is one of the dementias. And there are many factors. On the positive side is exercise. The first that comes out first is exercise, which means walking.
Brain exercise or physical?
No. Physical? Well, it won't hurt you, the brain exercise, but the physical exercise is what they have found to come out most positively with a delay in dementia, which means walking, running, swimming,
cycling,
rowing, cycling. Whatever is good for your heart is good for your brain. And inadvertently, the cardiologists, their emphasis on the health of the heart has delayed dementia, and fewer people are dementing now at their 80s than 50 years ago. At least this is what some gerontologists attribute this paradox, that fewer are dementing. But there are more of us, of course, at the age of 80 now than before. So, and there are other factors, of course, to be avoided, like alcohol. Alcohol is a neurotoxin, and smoking, and obesity. To be careful of your diet, which, of course, again comes to the heart. Look after your sleep apnea. Or your depression, if you can manage to do anything about that. So there are many factors, and psychologists are good in identifying the ones that are well correlated with delay in dementia.
Yes, I think that one of the strongest assets in humans are our ability to bring forward our feelings from pre-conscious into conscious into language, and then start to act. I have my master, Peter Lang from KCC in London, he always said, feelings are invitations to actions. And if you practice your ability to discover a feeling while it is emerging, or if you kind of teach yourself to ignore it, that's a human, we can put language to our feelings, and that gives us a chance to act and to decide and to prioritize. And what did you do in your book? You put words to many beautiful words, very big expression of all your experience, all your thoughts, all your ambition, not only on your behalf, that's my very strong impression, but for the planet.
Yes, well, thank you for observing this. You have read the book, and I can tell. And thank you for trusting that you will find something worth of your time in it.
Definitely, yes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan.
Great,
you have a good day. And by the way, yeah, if you have any colleagues in this, I would be happy to speak to them. My aim is that the book be noticed, that is the concepts, the themes of the book, especially the environment. That's the reason I wrote it. But I had to, of course, write a novel, not be didactic, but write a novel.